really wanted to talk about the goals of today rather than to start with straight into the detail. You've really had the main course of today's presentations, but I was going to give you, if you like, a taster, a starter. We have an excellent agenda in front of us. As Peter has said, it will get into much more detail on the individual items. But I think what we have to do is to remember why we're doing this. And we will obviously want to return from time to time to the value added of particular activities. We know that all effective medicines carry risk, and due to the way that clinical trials are geared, we don't know enough about those risks before authorization, and so the processes that we run are there to help us establish a safety profile in clinical use. So I'll say a word or two about that. I'd also like to touch on, Peter's talked about the solution, but the problem. What was it that led us to where we are today? And then finally, a brief word about the goals so that we can have a clear perspective on what we're aiming to do in this very timely workshop. Next slide, please, Rita. We know that we need continuous processes in place, not simply because in the early stages of marketing we're learning a lot, but even late in a medicine's life cycle, there are new issues that we may be identifying. Next slide, please. And the overall aim is to maximise benefit and minimise the risks of medicines, to deliver evidence-based information in a very timely way to all stakeholders who use medicines. And increasingly, we focus on having demonstrable public health outcomes. These are not simply activities to be carried forward because they sound good. It's because we need to have measurable benefit. Next slide. Once a medicine is on the market, we're in a much less controlled environment. And the working party that I've been dealing with this week is very much used to dealing with all the uncertainties around spontaneous reporting, data being gathered from health information databases and registries and so forth, potentially in very, very large populations, but as I've said, dealing with uncertainties. So next slide, please. The pharmacovigilance systems are evolving. They have evolved from the 1980s, if we work through this slide, from a focus on reacting to spontaneous reports. If Rita, you move us through the slide, please, to increasing use of signal detection systems and pharmacoepidemiology, to where we are now since the turn of the 2000s, risk management throughout the life cycle. And the key point on our journey is that we're about to look forward to benefit risk management. But Europe is special, if we turn to the next slide, because we are a network of member states, all operating systems on the ground to identify risk and to manage risk, coordinated at the centre by the European Medicines Agency. And so, moving forward, why are we doing what we're doing? As I've said, Peter has talked about the solutions, but on the next slide, let's just remind ourselves that there have been some very serious concerns about how drug safety is managed. Areas like the SSRIs and issues such as the withdrawal of rofecoxib have led to a lot of questions and shockwaves throughout the system. So the Commission carried out quite independently its assessment. And it's worth recalling that 5 years ago because it told us where the weaknesses are in our current system. Next slide. Peter has talked about how we correct these weaknesses, but let's remember why we are here with these corrective measures. That roles and responsibilities were found to be unclear. There was not a proportionality in the system, that the provisions, the requirements applied simply across the board. There was duplication, stakeholders weren't involved, decision-making was slow, and transparency was very poor. So next slide, please. We have legislation adopted in December 2010, transposed and coming into force in July, both at EU level, nationally, and then supported by good vigilance practice, and that's something we'll be concentrating on a lot today. I thought it would be helpful in the next slide just to consider if you're feeling that a lot is directed at yourselves as marketing authorization holders and industry. In the next slide, we can see, if you move forward, that everyone, all the actors, are heavily occupied at this moment, from the Commission making further law and implementing measures, to EMA, and we're focusing very much in Peter's presentation about what EMA is delivering to support the system, to the national authorities. We will be devoting more scientific expertise in the committees, but sharing work being audited ourselves for the very first time and contributing to the transparency initiatives. That health professionals in other stakeholder fora are being encouraged to engage more. Patients will be aware that they have, in some countries, a new opportunity to report adverse drug reactions. How is that going to add value? And here we are today talking about the new provisions and how to comply effectively and to deliver the benefits. In the next slide. Because marketing authorization holders have core responsibilities, and the new legislation affects everyone, regardless of size, the country of operation, or the product portfolio. It cuts across all the product life cycles, from application to monitoring to signal detection, and indeed it will affect, we understand, all procedures, systems and resources. The biggest change in regulation since around 2005. And we're going to get into today's programme momentarily because that's where the solutions are. Next slide. So what are our goals? Very simply, you're here to find out the latest. What is happening? Where have we reached with the new legislation being introduced? Secondly, you will want to focus on the key changes that affect your sector. What are the things you really need to have uppermost in mind? And we're here in listening mode too, to listen and to answer your questions. And the third goal is to help with the preparation and the readiness. As you've heard from Peter, there are good reasons for there being a slightly phased approach, resources not least among them. But preparation is everything, and so that is a key goal for today. So my final words, really, are that we're all in this together. I think together we can make it work and make it happen to the benefit of patients in the EU. But please remember, when you go back home today, you're not on your own. We're here to work to deliver this momentous change. So I'll stop there, and I hope very much now we're all set with the detail and perhaps the high-level view to get going into what promises to be an excellent day. You will be getting by email the presentations in the next 24 hours. If not later today, it will be by tomorrow. So please don't focus too much on small print. You will get all the information you need going home after this meeting. Thank you.